walk the student to the office. And, you know, long story short, the kid got expelled. And I think it was a real learning experience for him because he was very upset with himself. You know, he used that word because he had heard it in music or, you know, from TV or from movies. But it was a really learning experience for both of us because, you know, I was able to keep my cool and not, you know, not go crazy at that moment. But yeah, that was one of the instances I can think of.
What are some ways that you feel like we as music educators can do better in terms of just encouraging our students of color to be a part of band? I know I've had discussions in the last few weeks with some colleagues about, you know, why, you know, I don't understand why I don't have more black kids in band, or why I don't have more Hispanic students in band, and that sort of thing. What are some ways that you feel like, what are some things we can do to encourage that?
It's a great question. Of every program I've been a part of, there hasn't been much diversity. Usually, 9 times out of 10, I'm the minority, you know, in the classroom, and that's just the way it is. I mean, our population at Lexington Catholic does not represent the black population of Lexington, so it's hard to get those kids involved if they want to be an athlete. They don't want to be a musician, even if they play their instrument in middle school. You know, their focus is athletics and academics, and you know, not continuing to be a musician, which kind of breaks my heart. But you know, you can't keep all of them, and so that's a very hard question, Lois. I don't know how to keep those students engaged other than, you know, different literature, you know, playing different literature. You know, written by, you know, black composers, you know, maybe that would be a thing, or more pop music, because, you know, a lot of those kids really enjoy the pop music today. Maybe that's one way we can keep those kids engaged.
Yeah, I know it is a tough question, and lots of folks have asked me that through the years. I tend to think, and Tamika, you know, jump in here if you have an idea. I'll go through the same questions with you as well. But I tend to think, and I've shared with some friends, that sometimes I'm not really sure why I ended up. Well, I do know why I ended up in music education. I wanted to be like my big sister. You know, she was in the band and she was like getting to do a lot of cool things. But I also think that, you know, sometimes seeing people in that role that look like them is really important to to cultivating, you know, more students of color in our groups. So LB, unless you have anything else that you want to add, I'll probably move the conversation in the same set of questions over to Tamika, and you chime in, either one of you, anytime you hear something that you feel like will be. Tamika, tell us a little bit about yourself. And by the way, welcome, and it's good to reconnect with you after all these years.
I know. Well, let's see. I started playing violin in 5th grade. I got really interested. I was in 4th grade. And of course, I go home and I'm like, Mom, there's a lady that came to school today and she had a violin. I want to play that. Mother's like, no, we're not doing that. No, I'm not. But she finally let me. She told me if I kept my grades up, I would get to do it in 5th grade. And I did. And it was like, that was it. I mean, I just fell in love with the violin. Then my orchestra teacher, Miss Matris, in 7th grade said, I need you to play the bass because you have long fingers and you're tall. I said, okay. So I did. And so in concerts, I would play violin on some of the pieces and then play bass on some of the pieces. And then once I got to high school, I just had to kind of zone it in because I knew I wanted to do something with music for my career. And it's like, okay. And I was also studying piano too. So it's like, I want to do piano, I want to do bass. Which one's easiest? So I ended up sticking with the bass and studying bass once I got to college. Actually, I was doing bass and piano. And after the first semester of trying to do both instruments, it was incredibly difficult. I mean, of course, the standard is high. And, I think when I was in one of my lessons after the piano teacher kind of smacked my hand there because it just wasn't right, I was like, yep, we're done here. We're just going to stick to bass. But so I've been playing a string instrument since fifth grade. And then when I went to college, well, for undergrad, I went to Western Kentucky University. And at the time, the string program was kind of small, but at the same time, it created a very intimate type of atmosphere. So it was, we was able to really zone in on some of those skills, and it's like, I mean, it's just a few of you guys, so you have to really, pull your weight. And then my grad degree, I got at U of L about 4 or 5 years after starting my teaching career. Of course, I started teaching in Owensboro. My first 3 years of teaching in Owensboro. I've been teaching for 17 years now in Owensboro. And I got to study under Karen Higdon. She was like my mentor at the time, and she was just absolutely perfect for me. Like what I needed to be able to succeed. And a lot of things that I still do in a classroom, she like filled my tool bag with, I'm so grateful for that time. But my experience in Owensboro wasn't the greatest outside the classroom. So I knew I had to get out of Owensboro, in the classroom's great. No complaints. I mean, like, really, it was wonderful. I love my students. My students loved me. And I love the parents. And, but I had to go. So came back to Louisville because I grew up here in Louisville, Kentucky all my life. And then came back and, of course, teaching in JCPS. And I've been at Brown School, which is a K through 12 school for the last 14 years. So I teach middle and high school orchestra there, and I teach the Suzuki program for 1st through 5th grade. So potentially I can have a student out from 1st grade all the way up to the 12th grade because I feed my own program. So it's an enormous job, but I love it. And, the kids, it's a huge community, basically. I mean, the kids help me with all the concerts because every year I tell the kids, each concert, especially with the little kids, there are, 200 and something little kids on the stage. And I'm like, there's just one me. I need, but I absolutely love it. And that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years. And I'm a church musician as well. I've been doing that pretty much all my life. That, supplied some money for me during the college years, how those years can go. So I currently am the pianist and organist at my church. So I do that as well. And so that's, as far as my career, that's where I am.
Yeah, that's great. So in Owensboro, because I was at Davies County High School while you were in the Owensboro City School system, I guess. I was in the county schools. And I know that for me, I love the kids there, and I love the school. It was great, but it was just not a very diverse community, and so there was some challenges for me. At the time I was there, I was the only minority on the faculty. Period. Yeah. And I honestly think there were maybe 5 minority students in the whole building at the time, and actually one young man who was from India, I believe, that was in the band. So it was really that was a challenge for me. As educators, we are constantly getting served surveys to do, where they're anonymous surveys, but they ask you to share your race, your gender, and your race. And I saw the first one of those, and I was like, okay, this is no longer anonymous for me. So it was really weird. I quit filling them out. So Tamika, share with us, if you would, maybe some experiences that you've had that are uniquely related to being an African American woman. We call ourselves a double minority sometimes. In terms of teaching, so positive. I know that I think about the positive, where I can remember when a student told me that I was the first Black teacher that they had, and I remember the enormous weight that I felt and the sense of responsibility that I felt, because I never really thought about that very much. Do you have anything like that you want to share? And it can be uplifting, or it can be maybe a challenge or a stumbling block that maybe you have.
Well, I think as far as career-wise, when I got to Brown School, I mean, going from Owensboro, where I was pretty much the only minor, except for my principal at Apollo High School at the time, was Tom Purcell. He's an African American man. So if there were other African American people on staff, because of course we do the itinerant things. I don't, wasn't around every day, so to see exactly, but there weren't many. But when I got to Brown School, the first thing I noticed as soon as I walked in the office, it was just all brown faces. Matter of fact, the only people that weren't African American was the principal and the secretary. So it was like almost a culture shock a little bit, so I was so used to being the only one. So, and my students, it's very diverse there, at least when I first started, it was very diverse there. So that it wasn't anything, abnormal to them to see an African-American teacher standing in front of them. However, in Owensboro, that was a different case. And it's like, whoa. So, and then at the time I was so young and I looked like a lot of the students. So, it's like, okay, we're about the same age. So what are you going to teach me? I don't know, but I think as far as experiences that I've had, we have to go all the way back to like grade school. I remember being in first grade, and at the time I didn't know what to call it, but it's like, my mom used to say to me all the time, if I have to come up to the school, you better be sick. Or, if I have to come up there for any other reason, you're in trouble, So there would be times and I would see my mother, popping at the school, and I'm like, I didn't do it. I don't know what's going on. I just tears immediately. But one particular instance, and I was in first grade, my teacher at the time, and it's like, again, I didn't know what it was called. I remember she let everyone go to the restroom except for me. And I couldn't understand why. I kept asking. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I sat in the second row from the door in the fourth seat. And I remember asking, I kept asking. A little mixed boy was like right next to me. And I was like, I need to use the restroom. She would not let me. She wouldn't let me. So, of course, naturally, what's going to happen if, you don't let them go? So I ended up urinating on myself. And then I remember going into the counselor's office, and she was an African-American woman, and she was hugging me. And I couldn't understand why she was hugging me and crying. I was like, oh, you feel my pain too. When my mom comes up here, I'm going to get in trouble. So that's why you're crying. Okay. So my mother comes up there in her rollers, in her sponge rollers. It's serious. Mom shows up first off at school and in your sponge rollers, something's going on. And she came and looked at me, and she walked out of the room. She disappeared for about 30 minutes. I don't know what happened. Well, after that, I never saw my teacher again. Like, and I think it was several instances with that particular teacher where she was treating, especially, the African-American students like this. And it was like one of the things that they kind of needed to, kind of get something to happen, get something done to remove this teacher, because it was anybody who was not Caucasian that she would do things to. She would write dummy and stupid on my papers, as well as other students and things like that, which, set me up for not so good experience in elementary. And the same thing happened in second grade, but it wasn't until third grade with Miss Kennedy. She just kind of wrapped me in her arms, and it was like, ooh, love from a teacher. What is this? And I remember her working with me a lot. The same thing in fourth grade, Miss Weatherby. Like, I remember them so vividly, and they just kind of pulled me up. So by the time I got to fifth grade, I was back on, a grade level, and I was all good, then I was able to do music. But I think those experiences, set me up even for my own career, I don't ever want a student to be treated like that. And at the time, again, not knowing what it was called, but later, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was a victim of that, but I think, in situations like that, it does affect student learning, obviously, especially later, and you see yourself being ostracized from other people, but as far as teaching, like when I taught in Owensboro, again, the students, parents, faculty, even, I had no issues. It was a great experience. It was the city. Like I didn't feel comfortable going to restaurants, because I would go to restaurants and I wouldn't get served, or the waiter would come to our server would come to our table and introduce themselves, and then we wouldn't see them anymore. Well, I don't want my food from you. That's okay. And there was only certain parts of town that you could live in, otherwise you'll get harassed. Things like that. And it was like, I even remember there was another instance where the Spanish teacher at one of the schools that I was teaching at, like we had a really good rapport at work, no problem. Hey, how are you doing? Hola, ¿cómo estás? And then I saw her in Walmart one day. I mean, like we were in the cereal aisle. I was standing in front of the Apple Jacks. She was standing in front of the oatmeal. And I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And she's like, and she just turned and walked away really quickly. And I'm like, my breasting, what's going on? And it's like, why? So I had to address that when I saw her at school. I'm like, I saw you at Walmart. She's like, oh, I didn't see you. Ma'am, we looked eye to eye. I spoke, but you ran off. That's awkward, but okay, I understand. I get it, So I think those are a couple of experiences that I had, from elementary to, teaching. And then at, my current position, I honestly, as far as the students and the parents, I mean, they're very supportive of the program. So I haven't had any issues, with it. And I think a lot of the students really like the fact that, they do have diversity standing in front of them. And again, but I have my students from first grade all the way up to 12th. So our rapport is a little bit different. It's really like they're my kids, so.
That's really, really very, very interesting. Your stories that you shared, and although, some are painful, I think it's great that, you've learned from those, and they kind of make you, it's funny how things that happen in our past somehow end up shaping us in future positions. I know that when I came to Lexington, I had the same experience. When I walked into my classroom and I saw all the different colored faces. I mean, not that I don't love all of the kids that I've taught. Well, most of the kids that I've taught. There's some that, y'all know. But it was refreshing to me to see all the different colored faces. It was really pretty joyful. And I know I've talked to, some of my friends that I've worked with here, April and Bill and Jeff, they know that, when I first came here, it was just so different from what I was used to in other positions that I've been. So Tamika, how do we move forward? What are some things that we can do as music educators, you think, to move forward? I will mention, LB talked about, diverse composers and things like that. I know several years ago, I participated in a multicultural workshop conference in Louisville. And, one of the things that was, as a band director, I was invited to make a presentation. And, what we do is considered surface culture. So, but it's what we do. So, what are some things that, you can do to help us move forward in terms of addressing diversity and making sure that our kids of color, feel valued and
Uh-oh.
Lois?
She's frozen.
It just started storming here, so that's probably the issue.
Yeah, well, I'll go ahead and address the question. But I think that's the $1 million question. Where do we go from here? And I think that's a worldwide thing. But I think it's a matter of eating an elephant. And how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, like one instance at a time, one situation at a time. I think really being thoughtful in your actions and really saying to yourself, am I being equal? I think it starts with that, being aware of what's going on, not just dismissing it, like the whole Black Lives Matter / all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter. We're just saying, hey, I'm pretty sure you may feel the same way, Lawrence. If a cop pulls up behind me, I'm nervous.
Every time.
Exactly. I mean, like fearfully nervous, like, okay, what do I do? You have to really, really think about those things. And I think it's just being aware, not dismissing how the students are feeling, being equal in your classroom, if there's an audition or something occurring, are you being equal with all of them? It's just an example. I don't know, but presenting a picture of equality throughout, your school. I think I uphold my students and ask them questions on, because I know I had a lot of students who, they would come to me after school and talk to me all the time, like, oh, yeah, I just, this happened. It's just racist situation. I think just being careful in your language and being sensitive. And I think it just begins with that, and just, and ask the students. They'll tell you, you know, but I just think it's being aware and starting, like I said, with every single little situation. But
I agree with you 100% on that. I think we as people of color are just looking for equality across the board.
yeah,
We just want to feel as if we're accepted just like, anybody else in our school or in our community. So it's just it all goes back to the equality thing.
right. Right. I totally agree, and I think we could probably go on for days and, talking about our experiences,
Sure.
things that has occurred personally, you
Right.
know, and in your career wise. But I think, I think just not choking those things up as, oh yeah, okay, that happened. You'll be all right.
Right.
But like that's it could be a life-changing experience.
Right. Well, and
So Lois,
also,
I'm sorry, Lois.
no, go ahead, John.
Lois has texted me and said she's trying to get back. It was a lightning strike,
Yep.
and it is storming over this way, as you mentioned before. I think probably, and I really hesitate to speak for anybody else on this topic, as we have shared before. But I expect, I know for me, if I were in the schools, and I guess also I think associating with our any number of our teachers who are African American, and of course other ethnicities too, as Lois talked about. I don't, I certainly don't want to do or say anything that's tone deaf, or, because, and I wonder, you talk about the microaggressions, which it's always struck me that microaggressions is older. We person sometimes doesn't realize something that he's doing or saying that is taken a different way. I don't know if you can talk around that. I don't really have a question, but it's just an area that a part of this is that I want to learn and I think I am by just watching, but I want to learn what does go on in your minds. Oh my gosh, the elementary classroom, Tamika, I would never have thought that. I do understand about the police thing. We've heard about that, but being told you can't go to the restroom, oh my goodness. Well, that's blatant, and that's really, really something. But what about, and Lois is back, but what about the kinds of things that, as a white teacher in a school with Black students, with Black coworkers, maybe what do I need to be attuned to better than people seem to be, from your perspective? If that helps at all.
Well, I
think
remember.
oh, sorry,
Go ahead. No, I just remember
out.
instances saying, a white colleague would say, well, you don't act black, or you don't dress black, or you don't talk black. Well, I am from Eastern Kentucky, and I didn't choose to be born there. That's just the way it happened. And but my question, in the back of my mind, John, is, what is a black person supposed to sound like? How is a black person supposed to dress? I guess I'm just so unique to myself and my own style. I just dress the way LB dresses, and I talk the way LB talks, and that's just the way I see it. And it's all about perspective. As Tamika's experiences in the classroom are way different than mine, because she's in a predominantly Black school and I'm in a predominantly white school. So with our friends listening, I think so many different perspectives. And I know Chip, he teaches in a predominantly Black school as well as others on this call. So like I said, it's all about perspective.
Well, I'll say this: well, my school it's not predominantly Black, but I think in my school there's a lot of diversity in terms of we have very different, students. It's just different, and I think because it's such a small school, I mean, I think we only have about 700 and something students in the entire building from K through 12. That I think that it feels like a community, and it's, because everybody has such different circumstances. It's like, oh, you're different too. Oh no, we kind of, band together. But I think going back to John's question, I think it's just a matter of being sensitive, and watching your language, I guess, so to speak. For instance, I had a couple of high school students who were told by one of their teachers, because they got in a heated argument or whatever about an assignment they wanted to turn in. And because this particular teacher let another student of non-color turn this assignment in late, but they wouldn't let them, the African-American students turned it in late. And then, the teacher said, if you don't like it, you can just go back to the motherland. I mean, okay, like what is that gonna do? But just being sensitive, I think, in your language, and when a student is offended, kind of read that and go from there. I'm like, okay, make a mental note. Probably shouldn't go there again.
That's great. I'm sorry, you all. We had a huge thunder, crack, and lightning, and everything went away for just a second. So we're getting some big storms here in Lexington. LB, you can probably hear them too.
Yeah, I heard the crack
but
too.
Anyway, thank you, John, for your question. Do we have anybody else that has a question out there, or a comment that they would like to make, or anything in general that you would like to share with us? If you'll raise your hand, or if you'll let John know what you're thinking.
Probably if somebody wants to ask the question live, they would turn their video on. Yes. And their mic, and do that. And and if they want to put it in the chat, we'll read it.
There's Mr. Morris. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, I've got a question.
Kevin is one of my student teachers that that I loved having because he was so tall. He could get his feet off the top shelf. Go ahead, Kevin. What's your question?
So I teach at Winburn Middle School here in Lexington, and it's a very diverse population. And Sherry and I were looking at our numbers and who goes on and who goes where and why students leave band. And we can see it. There's a gifted program at our school, and then there's neighborhood kids at our school. And just watching that, this is our second year, and coming back and looking at numbers, the students who are leaving are mostly our diverse students, like just in general, and trying to keep those students on board and in the program is of course our goal. And we're wondering just what we're trying to anticipate their barriers all the time, but I want to know too how to make the experience that we have in the classroom just essential to what they do at school and essential to everything they like about coming to school. And they really enjoy the class. It's just there just seems to be something when it comes recruiting time, especially into high school, that we see just huge barriers go up for all our students that are basically our non-white students. There's just a big jump there. And we're brainstorming ideas to get them in. And you guys mentioned earlier, Lois, I think, said them seeing students that look like them at the high school level and at the college level. And we're really mindful of that every time we show recordings in the classroom and things like that. But I'm just trying to think of other ideas, especially for 8th graders, maybe into high school, for our students, or maybe barriers we aren't anticipating or something like that. If you guys have any input.
I think, or Tamika, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think just making it relatable. I know we have our set of music that we want our students to learn. There's nothing wrong with that. We all, decide our students should learn this, but sometimes you have to choose, pieces that's going to grab them. I always say, okay, these are my student pieces that I know that they'll like and they'll have fun with. Because when you have that, then they'll appreciate the other things that you present. I think that's part of it. And they're like, oh, we're playing stuff I don't like. I don't like that, But when I bring out something that's a pop piece, which, a lot of times we got to change the rhythms because for whatever reason, they done it all the rhythms. Hey, that's another story. And add a little bit of autonomy in it, let the kids, add some things in it. I had, students in one of my concerts, they want to add this little dance routine or whatever. Our person was like, not feeling it, but it worked really well. And, the audience loved it. They loved it because they felt like they had some input. I think it's just those two things, making it relatable and giving them a chance to have some input in it, although I'm very rigid, this is what we're gonna play for each concert, blah blah blah. And then there's that those 1 or 2 concerts I may let them choose a piece, and I'm like, oh yeah, I love that. And I remember when we did Royals, oh, it's so exciting, and the beating in and out, letting them do a little stomping and stuff, and they really got into it, so I think that would help.
Okay, I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And so many live recordings now or like the BET Music Awards. You see so many orchestras on stage with, artists like Beyonce, and you see, you see so many horn players, that are performing with these groups. Sometimes, yes, they're, faking, but a lot of the times, you see, like when I see a horn player on stage, I'm like, I'm glued to the TV when I'm watching this.
Yeah.
When I'm watching this performance. So like Tamika said, make it relatable and show those videos where those kids can see, I can do that. So obviously we didn't have assessment this year, but last year at assessment, one of my colleagues came up to me and he said his student, saw me on the podium conducting, and he told his director, he was like, he looks like me. I can do that. And that just warmed my heart. You know what I mean? That was a really, really cool moment for me. And I hope it was cool for my colleague and his student as well.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
It sounds like it. That's awesome.
Yeah, that would have been, Kevin, that would have been my point to add is if, I know, if your budget allows or you can get some volunteers or whomever to come out, I do think it's important for kids to see musicians that look like them.
Yeah.
I got to see my big sister, and I really wanted to be her, and I really, that's why I chose this profession, because I wanted to be my big sister. I had her in the house. I got to see her. She was a terrible clarinet player, and I hope she's not listening on this call because she knows I love her. But we understand she wasn't the greatest musician, but she certainly, made a huge, huge difference in my life. I had a question pop up. Can you offer some reading and viewing suggestions?
I saw Sherry's
Tamika
question.
Or Lauren or LB, you want to jump in there on that one?
Yeah, I actually just recently read an article put out in 2019 from NPR, and the title of the article was called "Why is American Classical Music So White?" Okay, so I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And it's all about the perception of Dvorak. In the 30s, Dvorak predicted that American classical music would draw from African-American traditions. And somewhere, through the years, obviously that didn't happen. And then his question was, Dvorak wonders why American classical music has remained so white. And nobody could really answer that question in the article, but I do encourage you guys to reach out and read that article, because, it talks about Gershwin and all the, the idioms that he put in his music, being a white composer, but his music was so rich and jazzy and juicy. And so I encourage you guys to read that. It's called Why is American Classical Music So White? It's on NPR.com.
Tamika, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not really. I mean, I'm constantly trying to educate myself too, because I think with a lot of people, there are certain areas that I didn't know that I wasn't woke, so to speak, on. And it's whoa, learning a lot. So I think it's just whatever articles you find interesting, just try to grab as much as you can. I don't really have much input on that.
Yeah, and I would encourage you. I have a niece she was in Prattville, Alabama, and she is such an avid reader. And the last year or so, I was talking to Brittany, and I was just telling her that, I feel like I should be doing more. I should be learning more. And, she mentioned to me that, the fact that you're doing what you're doing and you have for so long is huge. And, I would say that to LB and Tamika as well. But, she gave me a big, long reading list that I am, happy to share. I mean, just, and it's her reading list for me starts you know, um, very educationally. I mean, it's just like, this is what happened. I would just encourage folks as you move through this, that I think I posted on my Facebook when all of this started, that I encourage people to read and understand the history, not just of African Americans in this country, but all ethnicities. It's so important that you just read and understand their history, and read books, read articles by people you trust. Don't trust Facebook and Twitter, even though I'm a Facebook and Twitter head, but that's not where I get my facts from. So I would encourage you to really do real research, and sometimes real research is not just Googling a topic that you're interested in. You really have to dig and find experts. My niece is my expert. My Brittany is my expert on that. So anyone else want to pop in and ask a question? Or send us one over the internet. I'm so old fashioned, I'm sorry. I thought when April Kite first mentioned Zoom to me back when all of this started, I thought they were having exercise classes every morning. I thought that's really cool. They're all having a little motivational exercise class. So anybody else? So I'll give it just a second. Okay. You all see the chat. In a school with a predominantly white population, what can I do to address the challenges regarding race that may affect my students of color in their lives? LB or Tamika, you want to bounce on that one?
Sorry, my 2-year-old's upstairs screaming. I'm like, I can hear him. Something happened. I heard something go thump. I'm like, what's going on? What can I do to address the challenges regarding race that may affect my students of color and their lives? I think it's just listen to them. I mean, all you can be is their support, and try to, help them any way that you can. But I mean, pretty much just being sensitive, like I keep saying, but and trying your best to offer, the type of support that you can.
Yeah, to piggyback on Tamika's comments, just keep that open dialogue. Sometimes it's not easy, and sometimes it gets uncomfortable. And I mean, maybe we can't get that uncomfortable, talking about race and racism in the classroom, but I think where to take it to an extent, and just keep that open dialogue with your students of color, and do your history, and make sure you know where you're coming from, and make sure that's positive information, and that will help your students of color. Keep that open dialogue.
Yeah, I think also, Ross, if you will, like I said earlier, if you will make sure that you are keeping your expectations the same for them, certainly. Educating all of the kids in your room. If you're doing a piece by a Japanese composer or an African American, making sure that you're recognizing that. You don't necessarily have to point the student out that happens to be of that ethnicity, but just being very global in your approach to music from different cultures, and making sure that the kids understand and appreciate that and the contributions that are made. So very good question. Very good question. Anyone else? We're getting close to the 1 hour mark, which is great, so that you guys can get your 1 hour PD. I'll remind you as I'm waiting, and if you have a question, you can type it in, or you can pop up in your video and audio. I'll just remind you that John has posted a link to the certificate of participation, which is really cool. If you've never used one of those before, I mean, it's like I had a certificate in like less than 5 minutes. It's really, really awesome. John is reminding me how much time that we have. I will also encourage you to, if you have ideas, or if you have more topics that you would like for us to cover in the coming weeks, that you please let us know. You can email me directly, loisuwiggins@gmail.com, or you can let John or you can let George know. So please do that. And I know that Tamika and LB, I'm sure, would entertain your questions if you had something private that wanted to discuss with them, as would I. I'd be happy to help. It's one of my favorite things to do in the world. I can't imagine what this has been like for you all as music educators going through this pandemic and not being able to see your kids. I missed the opportunities I was getting as a retired educator to get out and be about the state and in Tennessee and in Ohio. And that all, I had a packed schedule, which was fine by me, except that it all disappeared about mid-March. So if there are no more questions, our guest next week on August the 10th are Chase Miller, who I see has been with us this whole time. He's one of my great newer Lexington friends, and Miss Linda Pulley, who is the new band director at No Middle School. So I'm really looking forward to having conversations with those folks and keeping the conversations as diverse as I can. I apologize in advance that my panel is more band heavy, but that's what I did for 30 years. So those are the folks I know the best. So if you have educators that you would like to hear from, please let me know. Please let me know so that I can get in contact with those folks and we can get them in on the conversation as well. John, did you have anything? And again, thank you, LB and Tamika, for being with us tonight. John, do you have anything you want to add in closing?
Well, one thing that's occurred to me here as we got to the end, and I think the question about is, do you know of resources that people can look at if they wish to, things they might read, articles, books, or videos they might go to, certain YouTubes that have been posted or whatever. I think it occurs to me that what we can do, Lois, is collect some of those up, and like we've done for COVID-19 things, here's a bunch of COVID-19 resources, we can do the same thing for this conversations topic. We can collect up resources. So anybody that comes across something, oh, this is a great article, email it to Lois or me, and we'll look at it and likely put it in a list on a web page that we keep.
That sounds great. That sounds like a great idea and a good opportunity for people to contribute. If you've read something that's been good for you, please make plans and spread the word and be with us next week at the same time. We'll get going we have a little I had a little pre-chat with the guest, and then we'll get going again next week at 7:30, 6:30 Central Time for my friends out in the western part of the state. I do appreciate you taking some time of your evening to come and be with us and hopefully just broaden our perspective as music educators out there. And again, I thank our guests, LB and Tamika. It's great to have you guys, and we'll see you guys next week. So have a great rest of the
Lois.
evening.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Guys.
You're welcome.
Nice to meet you, Tamika.
Same here.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.